Hey there gamers, DreamcastGuy here, and today we're talking about the future of Resident Evil, because last night there were literally hundreds of leaks about what's going on for the next 5 years, including 2 big remakes for Resident Evil Zero, heck yes, and Code Veronica being fully remade, which I'm extremely excited about, but also a ton of leaks about Resident Evil 9, Requiem, because it sounds like that's going to be the last Resident Evil in the conventional sense. And I want to break it all down because these leaks are coming from Dusk Golem. Now, this guy has a 100% track record. If he talks about it, it's legit. But this seems to me like something substantial is about to shift. Resident Evil is my favorite game series of all time. It's Resident Evil and Final Fantasy. And I guess I've kind of been considering the fact that Capcom has handled this so incredibly well. Like, actually consider all the game series, all the great stuff you love that's just gotten worse and crappier and live service or filled with microtransactions. Capcom is very unique in the fact that they've increased the budget, the polish, the love in Resident Evil, and the games keep getting better. But also at the same time, it does feel like we're reaching a conclusion. Let me break all these leaks down because the reactions to it have been very insane. A lot of people are very much tearing their hair out about the idea of the end of Resident Evil as it currently exists, and also just the Code Veronica remake especially. Let's get into it. Hi, hope you're having a great day, and if you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay, now, I do want to make it clear that we're going to just talk about the big bullet points. This stuff from Dusk Golem, he posted about 1 million tweets yesterday about the development, canceled concepts, all sorts of stuff. If you're still on Twitter and you really want a deep dive sort of into the inner workings, the logic about why these games are picked or how they ended up the way they were, I do encourage you to check it out. But I want to really just take a look at the broad strokes because a lot of this stuff, I have to admit, just makes me so incredibly happy. But let me start with this because honestly, this is what seems to be what a lot of the internet is losing their minds about. The next remakes are going to be Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil Zero. They should be releasing in 2027 and 2028, though I'm unclear which game is coming out first. But that's what I'd say to expect. Said this many times over the last 2 years. And the reason this was a reply is that a lot of people have been speculating that the next big remake is going to be Resident Evil 1. Now, Resident Evil 1 is such a peculiar project because a lot of people consider it to be the scariest Resident Evil. I actually think that's pretty accurate, but Resident Evil 1 already has a remake. Came out back in 2006 on the GameCube. It's been re-released a bunch of times. In fact, I was playing it on Nintendo Switch last week. Game is still incredibly good and incredibly messed up, but a lot of people have been talking about the fact that Resident Evil 1 doesn't need a second remake. Does that original game, even if it is on current consoles, even if it is still very playable, does that deserve like the RE4 treatment where they completely reimagine it? Now, I think that part of what really strikes me about this leak here is that historically, as we've been getting all these remakes, they typically space them out. You get Resident Evil 7, then you get Resident Evil 2 Remake, then you get Resident Evil Village, then you get Resident Evil 3 Remake. Like, typically they try to stagger them out. So it's not just remake, remake, remake. Typically it's this mix of old and new. It's a bunch of stuff to make it where people are incredibly excited, not just about Resident Evil as a retro throwback, but actually as a current living, breathing brand. So the fact that they're actually trying to do 2 remakes in a row, this to me, I think, is extremely exciting, but it also feels like a shift in tactics that we just have not seen before. But it's funny to me that I have to admit that as a Resident Evil superfan, I love watching people freak out about this. I mean, this is one of the top posts right now with hundreds of comments over on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors Reddit. And it's just his tweet saying, hey, it looks like Code Veronica and RE0 are getting remakes. Absolutely love Code Veronica. Zero on the train sequence is quite the experience. There's so many people just being like, bro, I want Code Veronica so badly. But here's something that really kind of highlights it, which is that if we get a Resident Evil 1 remake, I do think that it will be completely different. Just because not only is the RE engine better, not only are graphics better and controls better, but I think the big pushback that a lot of people had before Resident Evil 2 Remake came out, God, 6 years ago at this point, a lot of people were afraid that making Resident Evil, a game that's historically been slow, that's been scary, that's been purposely hard to control at times if you play the originals, people have said it's going to lose some horror if you have some over-the-shoulder aiming and stuff, right? And it clearly proved that you can have that the Resident Evil remakes are still terrifying, even if they are also easy to control. So I've seen some people say, okay, I want to see a reimagined Resident Evil 1 now, but we also need to see a Resident Evil 5 remake. But some of these games have to be so substantially reworked. I do think that Resident Evil 5, not only being fully co-op, I just think that Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 1, there's just big parts of it that today, I just feel like the story would not feel as good. The maps, the big set pieces would not feel as good. If they're remaking it, I do think this stuff has to move around events to make it all much more cohesive than those original stories. And somebody brings up this. You cannot do a remake of Resident Evil 5 if you don't first get a remake of Code Veronica, because that actually explains the rivalry between Chris and Wesker. Also, doing Zero before Resident Evil 1 Remake means they can bridge the two games together. The weirdness of back in the day when we were getting these games, because they were released in a very strange order, the fact that it went Resident Evil 1, Director's Cut, 2, 3, then Code Veronica, then Resident Evil Zero, then Resident Evil 1 Remake, it made it where you had this weird mix of timelines where everything kind of connected, but never really directly. But I want to get into this. This is the thing I believe, but I think it's going to stir up the most debate. Dusk Golem says Resident Evil Requiem is Leon's last major role in the timeline. Media embargo lifts on August 20th. The game will be shown at Tokyo Game Show. Both Leon and Grace play big roles. Now, a lot of people in the comments, before we even break down what this means, a lot of people are saying, bro, there's no way they're going to kill Leon. Zero chance they kill Leon. Capcom clearly regrets killing Wesker. There's no way they kill Leon. Wait, they could actually do is have Leon killed off at the last second. Jill appears out of nowhere and takes the hit because Jill fans don't deserve happiness. Okay, so the thing about this is that Resident Evil has not historically killed a lot of characters, but also on top of that, usually they'll just sunset somebody. There's a bunch of characters like Billy in Resident Evil Zero that's in a game and then just disappears. There's a bunch of people that are very unaccounted for in the Resident Evil universe. We don't really know if they're alive, if they're dead, where they're at, right? But Leon is such an interesting thing that I will say that I personally believe they might actually kill him. And the reason why is because of the previous games we just got. Resident Evil 2 Remake makes new fans fall in love with him. A lot of people that never played Resident Evil now for the first time ever saw Leon, love Leon, are super in-depth caring about his story. Then we get Resident Evil 4, you get to see adult Leon. Leon fully developed, a badass super assassin dropped into a foreign country just killing his way out to save the president's daughter, right? I think that having Leon go back to the nuclear blown out ruins of the original Raccoon City, where his whole terrible journey began, and killing him off to save a next generation of hero, to me, that does seem like good writing. I mean, to me, for a series that has not had that many major character deaths, other than obviously the one in Resident Evil Village, which is so primo. God, I love Ethan, but God, his death. I actually cried at the end of Resident Evil 8. I legitimately bawled my eyes out. That's how much I liked Ethan. But okay, here's the thing, is that having him die, I think, would set it apart in a way that Capcom has not historically done with Resident Evil. As far as I know, part of Resident Evil 9's whole long-awaited endings and new beginnings stuff is supposed to be Leon's last major role in the timeline. Sure, he'll still pop up in CG movies and earlier timeline stuff, so you gotta look forward to that with Resident Evil Requiem. Leon and Grace are the main protagonists of Resident Evil Requiem. Yes, I'm repeating myself a bit here, but will end up being the case. Both play big roles, but I think when it's all said and done, in many ways, will come off more as a Leon send-off game. Resident Evil Requiem has a new showing at Gamescom opening night live on the 19th, then a media embargo lifts on the 20th, then it'll be at Tokyo Game Show. So it sounds like we're getting a lot of media blitz about this. Now, I think I'm curious to see what Leon looks like. This game, Resident Evil Requiem, is the deepest instant timeline we've ever seen. A lot of people don't realize this, but Resident Evil, historically, they've kind of based it on current year. You know, the games that came out in the 90s, they're based in the 90s they came out. And since game development is getting longer and longer, it does seem like they're trying to be less centered on this day, this year, 2025 game released in 2025. I do think they're trying to get more amorphous. And part of that is making stuff more out of order. More games in Raccoon City, more games about random labs over in Europe, more stuff to kind of show the living breathingness of the Resident Evil universe. And I do think that having a send-off of one of the classic characters would be an interesting thing to sort of set off this new era of Resident Evil. But let me look at this. Requiem story details with spoilers, open level areas. Let me go through this. This is your spoiler warning. I looked at this. I don't really think this is too spoilery, in my opinion. It's stuff that a lot of people have already guessed, but is now confirmed. But just in case you don't want to see some vague spoilers about gameplay and some of the characters and stuff that have already sort of been shown, here's your chance to bounce out. I love you very much. Feel free to give this video a like, but if you're ready to lock in, let's lock in, okay? Requiem story details with spoilers. Open level areas. Resident Evil Requiem will have a vehicle to travel around, possibly a motorbike. Huge innovations were made to Leon's combat. Zero remake got some sort of dev reboot, new mainline, big budget RE game coming in 2029 or 2030. Now, all of this sounds so insanely cool. There's a few other innovations, some I know about. Also, I don't know all of them. A small handful I don't mind sharing, as they've been working hard to achieve having good performance on open level design areas like Raccoon City, along with a vehicle to travel around it. The combat Leon has seen huge innovations. Honestly, some Last of Us Part 2-isms, but its own innovation. Now, I've seen some people debating what this means. I think that even if you hate the story of Last of Us Part 2, like myself, like a lot of people, the big thing about that is that Last of Us Part 2's gameplay is fantastic. The adaptive AI, the enemies will communicate. They'll try to flank you. They'll try to survive in a way that a lot of video games don't. A lot of video games, they're very much, the people you fight, they're pretty much walking mannequins. They don't seem to have 2 IQ among 4 guys, right? I like the idea that Last of Us Part 2, where the people did seem to struggle and be scared and be desperate, I want to see that level of crafting, of survivability in a Resident Evil game. That to me would be a very fascinating new change. But he later posted 4 pictures saying Resident Evil Requiem out of context. One of the pictures shows Alice from the Resident Evil Extinction motorbike. Interesting. So these are the Resident Evil spoilers out of context. Mama, I have no idea who this even is. William Taft? I don't know my presidents, right? Okay. Here's the other thing. So Resident Evil Zero got a reboot. We sort of knew about this, which is the fact that very much Capcom is obsessed with making the remakes as good as possible, about making sure the remakes are not just quality that people match, but to sort of match the nostalgia you already have for these games, right? Next big budget game coming 2030. So all of this to me is on track. Basically, they're trying to make the remakes as good as possible. The next game is going to be very, very big. This game will not be a remake and not a spin-off, but a big budget affair. Okay. Here is the thing I really want to look at. The story spoilers. The stalker monster is Grace's mother, Alyssa. This is revealed early in the game. So that really messed up monster we've seen in the trailers is Alyssa Ashcroft from Resident Evil Outbreak. Very wild. Grace's blood is important to the story. There's a big connection to Umbrella. Requiem is the final numbered title and the definitive end to Umbrella and Raccoon City. Bro, I'm actually digesting that right now. I don't know, man. The fight against Umbrella has been happening like my entire life, you know? Raccoon City is so baked into my DNA. I know the story had to end eventually, and I'm sure whatever they come up with afterward will be still really, really good, but it is just weird to conceptually think about coming to the end of a storyline that I've been so emotionally invested in now for like 30 years legitimately, right? Requiem serves as a conclusion for everything that began with Resident Evil Zero. This will allow Capcom to explore new stories and characters in the future. For future titles, it will no longer be a requirement to tie everything in with the series' histories. Capcom wants to move away from games being set in the year they come out. Since development takes so long, future games can be set anywhere in the timeline. Man, I'm so shocked. I want to play Resident Evil Requiem more than ever. I am truly so emotionally invested in whatever the hell this game is going to turn into. A new future, a new series, a new bad guy, whatever it becomes, I'm definitely locked in. But the end of Raccoon City, the end of Umbrella, man. What do you think about this? I'll be honest, I'm still sort of reeling from all this. I love you very much. I love Resident Evil so damn much. You guys rock. Thanks for watching the video all the way to the very end. By the way, go watch Weapons. I watched Weapons last night, that new horror movie. Legitimately gave me nightmares. Complimentary. But thank you for watching. Give this video a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. And please keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.